Hello, ladies and gents. Hagbard Celine here on another beautiful afternoon, and today we will be examining part 2 of the myth of buck breaking and slave farms. This one is going to focus on the subject that was examined in the last episode. If you haven't seen that yet, I advise you go back and take a look at it because it does document several websites that are saying that this was a practice that was fairly common. And this is the video that is sourced. Now, why these videos are sourced as some form of citation is frankly beyond me. I may never understand how this comes to be. However, what we're actually going to be examining is myth-making, something I find quite interesting. There are several factors that go into the creation of new myths, not the least of which is a kernel of truth. Around the kernel of truth that indeed, I'm absolutely certain some African American male slaves were raped in their time and raped by their masters as a form of either punishment or an expression of the master's repressed homosexuality. This was not a normative practice, and it was never institutionalized into sex farms. This I can rest fairly well assured on. That said, the behavior that has been documented does form the basis of their myth. The myth then forms as all other myths do, by observing certain patterns of behavior and attributing the unknown factor to some form of the supernatural. As given as an example from my last video, there was a gentleman who had written an article about the insecurity of black males in America, the sexual insecurity, and the constant need to present oneself as ultra-masculine. Around this insecurity forms the myth of buck breaking and sex farms, and the concept that never before in Africa was homosexuality in existence, before the European came, of course.
Because they were coming for a larger purpose. They wanted to take the human resource from the African continent, which was us, the most valuable resource on the African continent, and they had some plans to build their own civilizations and use the wealth of our knowledge and understanding to do it.
Again, this is part of the mythos. The mythos of these people is that we came to Africa to steal civilization, even though the imagery he's using here is actually more factually accurate than he'd like it to be. As in this scene, you can see white slavers trading with black slavers for guns, and black guards helping to move these gentlemen into the dungeons, as he so puts it. But this portion of the video is by no means the purpose of this analysis. We're going to skip through the classic issues of slave trade and the over-abuse we see here, and that this is all from cinema, which is kind of ironic that he doesn't seem to realize cinema that was made by white people to guilt other white people about slavery. No, we're going to skip through this classic portion to the new myth that's been built around this one. It's going to be interesting, trust me. But again, his examples are from cinema, which he doesn't seem to realize would make a whole lot of sense.
If we were lucky. Because not all of us made it to the slave plantations. There was another place where the feminization of the black male became really deep and penetrating.
The Freudian analysis of your language notwithstanding of deep and penetrating, this is where he gets into the concept of sex farms. Once again, mind you, all of this imagery is taken from cinema. Not only that, but I'd also like to point out that I'm fairly certain, I'm not wholly certain because I've only seen this movie once, but I am fairly certain it is from this film. This film called Goodbye, Uncle Tom. It was an Italian-made blaxploitation flick. It's disturbing. I'm going to leave a link in the description and you can go ahead and feel free to check it out, but it is some topsy-turvy, weird shit.
It was called the sex farm. And this is the area where the black man had everything that made him a man stripped from him. His job is to protect his black women and children. But now he has been stripped of that. And now he's been trained to be the salesman of the sexual exploits of our people.
In all of my digging, I can find absolutely zero evidence for the existence of sex farms as he categorizes them.
And so rich whites would go to the sex farms and they would get these black males who they strip their manhood. He won't kill for his women. He won't die for his race if necessary. He now is the sexual salesman of his own women.
Do you see how all of this goes back to the myth of forcible emasculation of the black man during slavery? That's the real basis for all of this. That was the basis of the previous video, and that's the basis of the struggle they're having now. We'll get to where I think this all came from in a little bit.
And he says, come on, let me show you what we got. Do you like her? Today we call it pimping. But he was forced out of the process of manhood to say, look, here my women are available for you. Let me show you this one. You want to take her in the back and try her out? Let me show you this one. Oh, you can't touch her. She's never been as much as kissed. The price on her, I don't think you got pockets that deep.
This is a practice that has essentially occurred since the beginning of time. Literally, upon the introduction of currency, monkeys do it.
He became the actual salesperson, which means everything that made him a man had been stripped from him. He was a male who took pride in the sexual exploitation of the very people his manhood demands that he protect.
Again, you're revealing your obsession with this concept of ultramasculinity and this idea that it is your job to protect black women.
This is a process that they put our people through. But you know these Europeans can be very freakish. So grown females was one price, but they really like the little young girls, 5 to 15 years old.
No, sweetheart, that's Africans currently still living in Africa.
And they would train a black male. They would pay him. And in exchange for these nice clothes and economic benefit, he would train these little young girls to dance and gyrate before the world and present themselves as sexually titillating to these grown white males who could then buy them and take them home as sexual slaves, or could take them in the back and have their way with these little girls.
Admittedly, once again, there is a kernel of truth here. Of course, there were white men that had sex with slave girls, particularly around the age of 15. That's where all the documentation that this supposed docudrama was based on comes from. The lascivious imagery is chosen by the Italian directors for shock value. You have taken their shock value imagery to heart.
Speak on it.
Can you imagine black men being reduced to such a level? And I want y'all to see this because it's important to understand. Imagine in your mind being so reduced as a man that you actually take pride in receiving gifts and economic benefits from the exploitation of your own women.
I actually understand where he's coming from with that imagery swap, and I honestly can't argue with this point.
Speak on it.
Can you imagine a time where we were so effeminized and so backwards that we would become the salesman of our own daughters?
Well, friend, you're ignoring the fact that this happened first in Africa, when people would sell other blacks to the slave owners, you see. And some of these people were women and young girls.
That we would take our daughters and say, hey, I want you to look sexual to the world.
Speak on it.
I'm supposed to be a father that protects, but no, that's not what I am anymore. I don't have nothing that marks manhood. Come on, little girl, let me show you how to present yourself to the world as a sexual object so that I can have some benefit. Can you imagine us watching our daughters do this before the world, even training them to do this?
So you understand that once again, he's building this off a kernel of truth that there is something fundamentally wrong in this cultural practice, and the fact that it does indeed continue to occur today, regardless of origin. I understand that he's definitely most comfortable laying these origins at the feet of the white race as a whole. However, the evidence upon which this is based, the myth upon which this is based, is unfounded.
Speak on it, God.
Slavery was a horrible day. Even it got to the point where we would do it so long, we would literally be out there with our daughters showing them how to act feminine. So we become feminine and demonstrating it.
Speak on it.
There's the insecurity again. There's the scary kernel you have of an internal issue. It was identified in that previous video by an author who recognized that part of the problem with this situation was internal to black males.
Teaching them so long, we would even teach the women that we were dealing when they became women. And at some point, it got to the point where we taught our women to desecrate themselves, and then they began to teach our daughters.
Now, I've spent quite a bit of time trying to figure out how this myth got formed, where it came off the rails, because a percentage of this, as I stated, is based on truth. That being said, this myth is perpetuated by a document that gets passed around these subcultures in the black community that is similar to the protocols of the Elders of Zion. It is called the Willie Lynch speech, and it is widely denounced as being complete fraud by anyone within the historical community. Unfortunately, in this document, what was laid out was the purposeful emasculation of the black man as a slave and the purposeful rise and empowerment of black women in their place. So, between the myth of the Willie Lynch document and the reality of documented cases of sadomasochistic sexual practices between slave owner and slave, we have the myth of buck-breaking and sex farms, two things that were not widespread practices involved in the slave trade.
Speak on it.
This was called slavery.
That's right.
I don't know if you remember that process,
Right.
but it was a horrible process.
FYI, he says that because he believes that he's regressed enough in his mind to have experienced slavery firsthand. He's one of those delusional people that thinks he's time traveled, essentially.
I don't know how much you know about it, but remember, the European didn't like females at all.
Ah, yes, here we go. A black man so insecure about his sexuality he has to pretend like it's impossible for a black person to just be gay. No. Homosexuality is a European thing. I know.
He always wanted to reach his highest and noblest aspirations, and that was always to be with a little boy.
Oh, not just a homosexual, but a homosexual pedophile. Lovely. Again, as I've said with several other African American people that would like to link the lineages of the Greek and Roman practices and current homosexuality, I direct you to the tribe that passes the power of masculinity along from adult male to child by the child giving the male blowjobs to completion, to, drink the seed of masculinity.
And so the Europeans would have a room where the white male would train the little boys in oral sex and anal sex, and they would train them. They would shine them up like females. They would put earrings on them and put them in dresses, put makeup on them, and let them wear fluorescent colored clothing.
I have dug for the gold paint earrings, pornographically displaying young black men evidence anywhere. I can find none of it whatsoever. It's completely insane.
And the white males would come. They had to have a lot of money. This was a special. You had to have money for this. And they would come and buy our sons and take them home as their sexual playgrounds.
That's right.
A, again, no. B, your use of homosexual men who have rescued children likely from poverty or Africa, and then saying that this is the same as having purchased young men for sexual slavery, is disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. And B, can we not get through one black presentation, one of these like this, without a "that's right"? Please, can we just get one?
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Seriously, how is that fucking necessary?
I mean, they would just purchase them, our sons, as their daughters, their sexual play toys, to take them home and keep them.
I do find it interesting that that accusation flies around so frequently in these circles, while at the same time these guys can't seem to acknowledge the fact that homosexuality was a disgraceful and potentially criminal act that could get you killed in the Old South. But no, between white slave owners, it was fine to have sex with little black boys, right? You fucking lunatic.
In the privacy of their own white homes. Slavery was a horrible process where the black male was actually transformed and effeminized so much that we were forced to support
That's right.
a process that turned black boys into objects of homosexual desire.
Again, this is where they have slipped off of the reservation of reality and into the planes of myth. This never occurred.
I want you to understand, they even have what they call breeding farms. On the breeding farms, black males, big brothers, well-endowed brothers, young girl, 12 years old, just get her first period. Whites would travel hundreds of miles down here in Virginia, Southern Maryland, Tennessee. They were all around the country. And they bring the little girl there for him to rape.
Again, a lie built around a kernel of truth. You have to understand that. This is a lie that is built around a kernel of truth. Yes, absolutely. During chattel slavery, slaves were bred indiscriminately and against their will, specifically for the sake of size and workability. Although I do think it's interesting that you keep using well endowed. You seem obsessed with this man's penis size. You're not gay by chance, are you?
Some of the whites didn't want to breed from a professional breeding fee to get a black male to be trained to rape the little girl, so they would do it on their own plantations. Sometimes brothers would be forced to do this 10, 15, 20 years sometimes, impregnating all the females. Eventually, after 12 or 13 years, they bring his daughter in there. He raped her. Now he has a daughter, and his daughter and his granddaughter are the same person.
Of course, white people invented indiscriminate breeding practices, right? Yeah, alright, bud.
250 years of this, brother. Says it ain't no one day.
That's right.
So we wonder where incest comes from.
Again, it's adorable to say that the concept of keeping a family lineage or breeding rights pure through incest is a white thing is entertaining, considering it's practiced by almost every tribal culture on Earth, including most African tribal cultures. Also, with the incest comment in the 250 years of this, are you implying that almost all of, or at least a lot of, American blacks are the result of constant inbreeding? Is that a statement you want to make, dude? That's kind of fucked up.
We wonder where these freaks in our family came from. These pedophiles and the retardation, as the brother said, of the African male spirit to protect and defend, turning upside down and becoming an assaulter, a victimizer of his own helpless, innocent race.
Ladies and gentlemen, what we have just witnessed is the accidental internalization of the noble savage myth. That is what that is, the innocent black race. That's what he just said.
And I want you to understand something, because it's important. For over 250 years, white law mandated that you must be a pedophile. It wasn't a question of your opinion of it.
Well, let's be honest. At that time, between 12 and 15, maybe 16 at the high end, would have been the time to get married. That was just the norm then. It had nothing to do with race. Everybody, all around the world, was getting together at about 12, 13 years old. Right around the first period is when mom started looking for a husband. Yeah, dude.
The law in this country said you were black, you were a slave, you must do as your white slave master says, and if you don't, you will be killed. You had no option. The law said you must be incestuous.
I would like everyone to take a moment and recognize that this is a man who is defending his race against just the average behavior of human beings. I'm not sure if he has personal investment in this. I'm not sure if he's personally repressing his homosexual desires or trying to ignore his predilections for young flesh, but he's trying to simply say that anybody within his race that is caught and is a pedophile, anybody who is in his race and happens to be homosexual, the only reason why this is the case is due to conditioning under slavery conditions. Seriously, that's what he's saying. He's saying otherwise there would never be a black pedophile, there would never have been any incest within African communities, which, let's be honest, there already was. You're ignoring the fact that these are human conditions.
That's right.
You must be a homosexual.
And the church
You don't have an option. Homosexuality is your life. And if you fought it and tried to resist it, you would be killed.
But you see, there's real anger, there's real confusion here. You can tell that he may have struggled with these issues. That's why he speaks about it in the terms that he does.
That's right.
So don't let nobody tell you that homosexuality's been around forever. You've been around, it's been around for white folks since they've been here.
That's right.
But we have proof. Our reality is proof that you had hundreds of years of laws mandating our complicity with child sexual abuse, incest, rape, homosexuality, and every filthy, degenerate practice you brought with your filthy behind from Europe.
I'll give him that the pain here is so very clearly real. He desperately needs his race to be racially pure, even though no African on the planet Earth would recognize him as a pure African. This gentleman right here has been already interbred. He hates the European portion of himself, of his own genetics. Potentially, he even blames the European portion of his genetics for some sexual predilections he has. Do you realize how sick that is?
That's right.
And you forced us into this. And we started opening our minds and seeing what's going on. We realized yesterday ain't that much different than today. Dr. John Henry Clark said the people who forget their past be destined to repeat those mistakes of the past.
That's right.
Now, here's where we get to the root of it and how I know that he's technically referring to the Willie Lynch mode of thought.
So I want to talk about this because I want to be very clear how this thing works. In order to enslave our people and put us through what they put us through, there was one thing that was critical.
Mind you, the root of this next statement is narcissism, first and foremost.
Because without this, they knew that they would have to pay a definitive price of their lives. So in order to get us in this condition and avoid the penalty for their crimes, they had to create the surrender of black manhood. They had to force us as men to surrender our manhood.
So essentially, the combination of the movie that had been suppressed, unfortunately, in the United States for some time, known as Goodbye, Uncle Tom's Cabin, and the existence of this Protocols of the Elders of Zion-like letter of the speech of Willie Lynch, we have this.
So in order to get us in this condition and avoid the penalty for their crimes, they had to create the surrender of black manhood. They had to force us as men to surrender our manhood.
So that's it, ladies and gentlemen. That's the building of a myth. That is how the already existent conditions combined with tiny, minute kernels of truth, usually tiny, minute kernels of truth that are not being hidden for nefarious reasons, but simply because, no matter the setting, we tend to not want to talk about acts like child rape or the drunken lashings that were given out by slave masters. We're all aware of the fact that slavery was reprehensible. No one needs to be reminded of that in the way that this movie purported to attempt to remind people. In reality, I do advise that anybody go and watch this film. Get through it, really. Get all the way through it. See the message at the end that's a little bit disquieting for the future, and understand that the movie did exactly what it purports to have not wanted to do. Figure that one out. But that's it, ladies and gents. I'm pretty much done with this subject. If anyone has any requests for me to do, please feel free to send them to my Gmail, which will be in my information section. Thanks for grinding through this with me. I hope you at least understand what I'm attempting to do here. I hope you've gotten something out of it. I'll see you all next week. Good luck, stay safe, and goodbye.
Es war mein Mann. der Hütte, es ist so Leumann.
Leila, du hast geopfert deinen Mann. Warum hast du das getan? Warum hast du das getan?
aber erkannte, dass die wahre, tiefe und ehrliche Liebe eines Weibes bedenkenlos jedes Opfer bringt. Und er nahm sich dieses Wesen zu seinem einzigen geliebten Weibe.
Laila, Laila, habt ihr Laila nicht gesehen? Ich habe geträumt, einer Erzählung gelauscht. Oh, könnte ich 1001 Nacht so träumen. Edin, von dir habe ich geträumt, dass du meine Schatulle bestiehlst.
Oh, Herr, auf Träume soll man nichts geben.
Und von Laila träumte ich, im Traume habe ich sie gefunden.
Nein, in Wirklichkeit.
Laila, du? Nein, nein, du bist die Frau eines anderen.
In 1001 Nacht. In Wirklichkeit bin ich dein, ewig dein.
Laila, mein Weib. Und nun hört, die wichtigste Reform habe ich euch bisher vorenthalten. Die Einweiberei wird eingeführt.
Das akzeptieren wir. Von diesem Artikel soll man nie zu viel haben.